Evening all, welcome back to Deadlight. This is part 2. So basically, in the story, he's managed to lose his companions. He's trying to obviously catch up with them, and he's just basically made his way through escaping, I guess, the dead zone. He's starting to get towards Vancouver. I think it's Vancouver. I know I could be wrong, but and basically he's just come across the these stooges or goons for the New World Order. I think that's what it's called. I could be utterly wrong, but basically these are bad guys, very bad men who are basically looking to terrorize survivors. So that's where we are. Also, I mean, I guess from last time as well, people kind of were, I think, appreciating certainly the musings, if you like, of old games, and I think certainly the way that the certain games such as this, which is old technology when you think about it, is kind of, there's a place for it. I think is definitely worth considering. There's also quite a lot of games out there that I think people would just never look twice at, yet probably are some of the finest games out there. Prime example, Dwarf Fortress. If you've never played Dwarf Fortress, it is probably the most detailed management sim ever, but because it's all in ASCII, it looks awful. So, I mean, basically you have to kind of get over the fact that it's 1980s Zork inspired stuff, and I think the reality is that actually once your brain just gets past the graphics piece, you then realize, wow, this is actually a phenomenally good game. And there's quite a few like that. I mean, Minecraft, I guess, is a prime example of a game that doesn't look pretty, but in a weird way it is. It's a very engaging game, and I think maybe there's almost a bit of a kind of rejection now of the modern industry, where people aren't necessarily looking for more and more beauty in games. I think they're probably looking for something a bit more I don't know, robust, a bit more in depth, and that's hence why Minecraft is, I guess, doing so well, because the reality is it's probably, I think, one of the most successful games ever, I guess, by now. It's certainly doing very well. Again, tricky really, because I think a lot of the time we've become beguiled with over-the-top graphics. So, things like Crisis. Crisis, I think, is a great example of a game where they just maybe went too far. It was so pretty, it was so well rendered and beautifully crafted and created that it almost started a bit of a barrier to entry for your computer. You actually needed quite a powerful computer to run it, and that was a bit dangerous. But in many ways, it was also, I think, just a bit, I don't know, it became so real, it became even false. Do you know? I mean, if you don't understand what I mean by that, nor do I, to be honest. But it's you know what I mean? I guess it's that kind of. It became so good, and the graphics were so good that all of a sudden they actually just felt less realistic. You were very aware. You know what I mean? You have to have a little bit of imagination, I would say. Otherwise, there's nothing at all. So I think a little bit of imagination probably isn't a terribly bad thing. Things like this. And Minecraft and Eve and Dust and all of these games where they're not the most beautiful games. They're certainly very good, but they're not kind of real world, completely blow your socks off kind of stuff. And I think that's not necessarily a bad thing, because you do have to have a level of immersion. It's funny, the old Peter Griffin saying where he says, just so you're aware, I'm very aware I'm watching a play right now. That's actually a fantastic statement that I think came from, I think Mel Brooks said it, where basically it's all to do with the fact that sometimes you can be so immersed in something, yet it's nothing to do with the graphics or the acting or the capability. It could just be a mixture of the above. I think certainly the modern gaming nowadays, as I said in the previous episode, is bereft of very good stories. So when a really good story comes along, and again, I think probably another example I would have here is Assassin's Creed. I love those games. I think they're fantastic. I mean, I've always thought that Ubisoft does a very good game anyway. Generally, you don't go too wrong with Ubisoft. And I'm sure I'm about to be told many games they've done that are just an utter part of bollocks, but generally I'd say certainly things like the Assassin's Creed trilogy. I've actually only played 1, 2 and then the various modules of 2, but I was very impressed with them, and I think and again, what kept me there again, realism was not great. I think certainly the mechanics were patchy. And again, don't get me wrong, I don't mean they were wrong. I think the simple fact was you could take on 20 guys with one sword and kill them. It's not very realistic, but I think that's by the by. That's a moot point. And I think what kind of engaged me with Assassin's Creed was how good the story was. And I think that's, to me, that is, it's important to a degree. I think sometimes it's fine to make your own story, but I think there is also this thing where you do want to be entertained. And I think, Assassin's Creed has done a good job. Even things like Deus Ex, there's a fantastic story behind Deus Ex or Deus Ex or whatever you want to call it. Because they had, again, very, engaging stories, very challenging subjects and stuff. It wasn't just, again, multi-level stories, just rare as balls. It's it's just absolutely impossible. It's like finding a sober person in Magaluf. It's just never going to happen, and that's a shame, because at the end of the day, a lot of the time you're looking for that multi-leveled gaming experience. Well, at least I am. I don't know about you guys. Sometimes it's great just to literally, I think the phrase chewing gum TV, chewing gum games, chewing gum whatever is nice. It's a nice concept, because to be honest, sometimes you do just literally want to just literally veg out and just literally switch your brain off and play a game or whatever, and that's cool. Okay. There are times when you actually want to engage in a story, or if you want to try and build something or explore something, make your own journey, whatever it may be, then that's also pretty awesome as well. So I think it's a thing. Gaming nowadays, there's so many options. When I think about when I started gaming, which was quite some time ago, I might admit, the only options you had were really stuff that nowadays people would just laugh at. When I was very young, things like the Sinclair Spectrum, Commodore 64. Then, as I started to come into a young lad, I started to get things like the Amiga, the Atari ST, the Commodore Amiga. And I vaguely remember them. I don't remember a lot of games by them. I don't know why, but that was, I don't know, actually. I just don't remember. For some reason, I don't remember a great deal of games that I played where, they on those platforms. I think I remember when PC gaming, my earliest, I guess, proper memories of gaming where I'm actually doing it for, I guess, a conscious hobby, was on the PC. And this was way back when you literally had DOS prompts. That's that's some time back. And I think, games that I really relish were, just sort of, again, large, kind of sprawling epic stuff. Like I played a game called Captive Dungeon Master. Captive was like a sci-fi version of Dungeon Master. It was very good, and many other things. But I think certainly when you look at gaming nowadays, you're absolutely, you're spoilt for choice when it comes to games. Back then, I think you still had a massive choice, but it was a lot less structured. So it was a bit, wasn't as good, I think. And again, that's a shame, really, because I think a lot of the time it just takes so much longer to create a game now than it did back then. Back then, you'd have some dude in his bedroom write a game out of basic code, then release it, and then make a few quid, and then do another one, and that was the cool thing of it. So really weird stuff like Centipede, and even some of the crazy games like the weird rape games and that. I never played them, but I just remember seeing at the back of computer magazines like adult XXX games and that. And as a young lad, you're always kind of wondering, what the hell's that? Sort of all very strange what people would do, but that was it. Basically, there was no censorship, there was nothing. You basically would pay £1 and you get a disc, a floppy disk, 3.5 inch, or even 5.5 inch, and then that would be basically what you get. God knows what you were buying back then. But now I think it's a very different thing. I think basically, you've just got such a structured thing. People expect some level of graphics and playability and whatever it may be, which is accepted and understandable. But I think there is something sort of to be said about games that do try to be very different, and I think this is certainly one of them. So here we go. Basically, talk about the game a bit more. So he's having a bit of a flashback now. Basically, we've just found a gun. So again, I didn't think there'd be guns in this, but I was pleased to see that there are. And I think again it's done in a really good vein, so you've actually got to keep pressing R to reload your 6-shooter, and ammo is pretty sparse, so
you've got to be a bit careful with it. So again, introduces another nice mechanic. Again, part way through the game, it's always nice to have something a bit more unusual come in. So we've actually got to Vancouver here as well. As you can see, this is pretty much a lovely place of death. So things are obviously going down here. I get some more ammo. Awesome. And basically, yeah, it's not looking good. Very atmospheric. Again, I'm always quite impressed with what people can do with certain engines. I think this is an absolute testament to Unreal again. I think the Unreal Engine is actually pretty old now. I think somebody was telling me in Dust a few days back that Dust is run on Unreal, which I think in gaming terms is actually really old now. But it seems to be weathering well, and I think if this is an example of the Unreal Engine, then it's not bad. I guess they do iterations of it, but again, Unreal as a game, there you go, there's a good example. That started life as one thing, it started life as pretty much a rail shooter almost. Yeah, kind of a rail shooter. And then it became almost like, it was almost like overnight, the whole tournament style of game came through. So Quake 1 and 2 were very much about a story, a linear story, blah blah, about an invasion of a planet, etc. And then Quake 1, I have no idea what the hell Quake 1 was about. That was just weird, wasn't it? That was like, here's some weird buildings, go and run around them with a gun. I think it was just a demo for like a next generation of Doom, probably. But Quake 2 certainly had a story. Then Quake 3 came out, and then all of a sudden you're back to no story whatsoever, and it's all about deathmatch. But again, that was cool because and I was quite hesitant about that. When that came in, I didn't do multiplayer games really at all, and I was a bit gutted at that because I didn't really want to have to play against computers. I wanted a story. I wanted to kind of figure out where I'm going to end up going in this character and that. And then when I found out you literally just basically run, rounds, I was gutted. I was really upset about it. And then I think Unreal Tournament 2004 came out. Maybe even the original one. I can't remember, but maybe it was 2003. I forget. But that game came out, and then all of a sudden the whole concept opened up to me. It was brilliant. This whole the weapon, the Redeemer. I mean, if you remember Unreal Tournament, you remember the Redeemer. What a laugh that was. And we used to play this match over and over again in called the Hall of the Giants, I think, or Hall of the Gods, I forget. But it was just this massive kind of huge cathedral sized building, just massive thing. And basically you just fire each other with the Redeemer and just try and kill each other. And that was fun. I think that was a really nice it's a totally different kind of change in the whole concept of what gaming was, because all of a sudden you're not necessarily, there's no story at all. And I think actually you could almost say that that's what began this kind of decline, not a decline, but this migration, if you like, to a gaming series or gaming product that didn't really have any story behind it. Like Dust in theory has a very tenuous story behind it. Battlefield 4 and even things like COD and that, they have the mimics of a story. They're just basically replicating whatever action film is currently in vogue. But I think again the reality is that there's no real kind of general story there. So I think that's a shame, because again, as I waffle on about, I think pretty much story is a key part of any game, and you almost need to actually cater for that. Maybe when people are generating these games, is that you should almost score them and build the genre differently, because we call everything FPS if it's a first-person shooter, even if it's a story-driven one or a concept, a tournament-style one. Maybe we need to give them different names. I know you get things like FPS, MMO, multiplayer FPS, all that, but the reality is that everything kind of is wrapped into one thing or the other. I think that's probably where I think a lot of these games will probably end up. Another example here is Just Cause 2. One of the finest games I've ever played, but the story is just absolute bilge. I mean, I've just never understood the story. When they try to explain it, they're obviously trying to do it with a straight face. They're actually basically just trying to be, all grown up and adolescent, and grown up effectively. But what they just came across as was, a kind of adolescent, annoying teen with a wispy beard trying to look old. And the reality is that this story behind Just Cause 2 was absolute pants. And it was a bit insultingly crap as well. I mean, it was just ridiculous. Funny, don't get me wrong, but it was almost as if they were actually just trolling the concept that they should have a story in the game, because the reality was it was basically a huge world physics demo with many guns, many engineering, methods of blah blah, and it just became a bit. It was just such a obvious troll is obvious. It literally was like that, because it just had that feel of come on game, you're not even trying now. But again, good game. Can't complain about it. I think it was excellent game. I think Grand Theft Auto 4 is a little bit the same as well. I mean, I know that's probably quite shocking, but Grand Theft Auto 4, the story behind it is literally the worst story ever made ever. Because it's just, and again, I don't mean to disrespect the game by saying that, but it's terrible because it's just an absolute sham copy of like a dozen different books, all done badly. And I think that's a shame in a way, because again, it's just a great example. I said it in the last video. It's a great example that Rockstar watch films, they don't read books. And I know that that's quite incendiary, let's say, but I do pretty much, well, again, it's evident from the way that they write their games and their content and their scripted scenes. It's pretty obvious that they're just watching endless films, because the content and stylization is all around a dozen different films. The Godfather, Godfather Part 1, 2, and 3. Then you've got Gangs of New York. You've got the old De Niro stuff. You've got Goodfellas. It all just basically sums up into a style, not a story, and that's it. Grand Theft Auto 4 had just style, and that's why it's so cool. Don't get me wrong, I love the game, but again, it's not really an engrossing entertainment-filled discussion at all around anything really, just other than here's a car, let's go and run people down. And there's a lovely idea. I mean, if you ever played the original Driver game, if you remember Driver, that to me had a huge amount more kind of heart and soul, because the difference is when you're playing Grand Theft Auto 4, you're basically very aware you're playing a game. Every single step of the way you're thinking, I'm playing a game, and that's a bit boring really. But when you play Driver, you felt like you're in a film, and that's the difference between a game and a film. And to be honest, most of us would rather be in a film than in a game, because a film is obviously a much more structured story. So Driver, you couldn't run anybody over in Driver, for example. No matter how hard you tried, they would always run out of the way, so it felt more like a film. Also, just I think generally around the way that the scripting and the narrative is it was very unbelievable dialogue in pretty much everything that Grand Theft Auto 4 was talking about. But again, I'm not shit talking about it. I think it's just, it's very difficult to kind of sit there with a straight face and say there's much good writing in games lately. And again, it's just not the genre. I think it's also not the audience as well. I think most people would rather just sit and watch film and be entertained from that style than they would be in a game. So I think this is probably why there's less focus on it. Stuff like BioShock and BioShock Infinite and BioShock 2 and Skyrim and all that, they're very heavily story run games. So basically, they do trade upon that concept of the story is king, but again, they are kind of sandbox driven. So the story, it's all pieces, it's all silos of a story, which I think works well, actually, don't get me wrong, but I think also it can be a bit samey from time to time. So there we go. Wow, what a long ramble and bibble about about gaming. And there we go. So basically we made it into Vancouver and he got electrocuted. We'll pick up in part 3 the continuing saga of Ralph. Hope you enjoyed that. See you next time.